Um, Good evening, students. So this video is on the paper Translation Studies, Unit 2, History of Translation, and the topic is going to be Romanticism. So the next topic we are going to discuss is Romanticism. See, as far as history of translation is concerned, we can compare history of English literature with history of translation, and to a certain extent both are similar. Let's say 17th century, that is neoclassical age, and 18th century, age of transition, and we have romantic age and we have romanticism. Okay, so almost everything is going to be similar to history of English literature, and then we were going to study Victorian age and Victorian translation. So history of English literature, the topics of history of English literature and the topics of history of translation are more or less similar. Okay. So before going into that, we have to revise the features of romantic age. And romantic age is the yearning for liberty and freedom. And lots of things changed in people's life, especially because of French Revolution. People had the mentality or attitude of freedom. Okay, naturally it reflected in literature, and it reflected in theories of translation. Okay. During the beginning of 19th century, not only in English, even whole Europe, Romanticism developed, especially after French Revolution. The moment Romanticism spread all over Europe, even theories of translation. Okay, so Romantic age developed not only in England, but it developed all over Europe. Okay. In all European languages, they yearn for freedom, and they do not want to follow any rules and regulations. With the full liberty, they want to write literature. Okay, so this is the mentality of writers or even people. They want full freedom, and especially because of the influence of French Revolution, people yearned for freedom and equality. And this is applicable for theories of translation also, and therefore they do not want to follow any rules and regulations in translations also. Okay, so German writer Goethe talks about stages of translation. Okay, here in this topic we have other translators and their theories, and what does this German writer Goethe talk about stages of translation? The stages of translation is based on aesthetic evaluation of Hessel. He says that translation is a result of re-evaluation of Hessel poetry and the translator's creativity. So the first stage is the translator's aesthetic evaluation of the Hessel. Okay, the translator reads a text in another language and he likes it, he wants to appreciate it. Okay, then only he will be able to translate. If he doesn't like it, and if he is unable to appreciate the poem, then he cannot translate it. He should not translate it. Okay, so the translator should like the Hessel text, and he should personally appreciate the Hessel text. Then only he should translate. He should translate the text, poetry or prose or whatever it could be. So this is the first stage that Goethe says, and the next one is it is the re-evaluation of Hessel poetry and translator's creativity. So there could be some plus and minus in translation, and it is a kind of re-evaluation in aesthetic terms. Okay, so you should appreciate it, and there could be some plus and minus in that Hessel text. And for that he is rephrasing it. He is doing a kind of re-evaluating it. He is doing a little bit of criticism, but with creativity. With the creativity, he is doing the criticism in another language. So that is the next stage of a translator in translation. Okay, this is what got a say. So see, the first of all he should like it, and then the next one he should appreciate it. He should be well versed in the SL text, and along with the creativity he is doing in another language. So this is said to be, and these are the stages of translation according to Goethe. And then Coleridge was the first to distinguish the words between imagination and fancy. Before Coleridge, Coleridge distinguished the meaning of words between fancy and imagination. Before that, the English people themselves consider that both are same. Imagination and fancy both are same. That's what they said. But Coleridge distinguished the meanings between fancy and imagination. So imagination is with the feelings and emotions I imagine, but fancy is a kind of mechanical imagination. Without any feelings and emotions, I simply imagine. Okay. Say for example, I have a book, and all of a sudden the book starts to fly, and this book all of a sudden starts to speak, and so this so mechanically I am saying. But in case with emotions, see with see this is my notebook, and this book all of a sudden starts to fly. Okay, so with the emotions I say, and so this is said to be imagination. Without imagination, this notebook began to fly, and it began to talk with me, and this is said to be a kind of fancy. Okay, so this Coleridge concept was applied to theories of translation also. So a translator should translate with imagination, not with fancy. So that is, the translation is not a mechanical process. It should be with the creativity and feelings and emotions. So that is what the theories of translation theory say in Romantic age. And August Wilhelm, a German translator, made distinction between translation as a creative process and translation as a mechanical process. And he supports translation as a creative process. So he Rama killed Ramana, Rama Ravani Kondran. So let's say killed Kondran. Okay, so this is translated word of in the TL, and I simply use it, and it is a kind of mechanical process. Using the dictionary, anyone can do it. So this is the example of mechanical process. Translation is not a mechanical process. So if a translator does the work of translation mechanically, it cannot be a good translation. And that's what August Wilhelm says, and he says translation is a creative process. Okay, with emotions and creativity, he should translate it. Then only we can call it as a good translation. And A.W. Sluggett is the first to say that the act of speaking and writing itself is a translation. Okay, in Romantic age only, Sluggett, A.W. Sluggett, he was the first to say that the normal speaking, the normal writing itself is a kind of translation. See, all of us think, and there is no language for thinking. Okay, my daughter Riya is also thinking. She feels anger, she feels sad, and she feels hunger, and she likes something, she wants something, and all the thinking process is done in the thinking process doesn't have any language. Okay, and I have a certain field, and I use English language or Tamil language, and I express it. So the normal speaking and writing itself is a kind of translation. So first time this idea is said by Sluggett, and next one, Friedrich says that translation is a thought process and not actual literature. So now we have to consider that if the national anthem of India, Jana Gana Mana, is translated into English, and it is not English literature. In history of English literature, you are not going to study it. Okay, and similarly, if Shakespeare's work are translated in Bengali or Tamil language, in history of Bengal literature or history of Tamil literature, you are not going to study about Shakespeare, because Shakespeare is an English writer and it is English work. In history of English literature only you are going to study about Shakespeare. Okay. In history of Bengal literature you will study about Rabindranath Tagore. In history of Tamil literature you will study about Thiruvalluvar or Pilangovan or Sethali Satana. So a translated work is not a part of target language literature. Okay, so it is actually source language literature. Okay, if the Tirukural is translated into Bengali or English language, it should be considered as a Tamil literature. For sake of our convenience, it is translated, and actually I am reading Tamil literature. So that should be the mentality of the reader, and that is the reality. So by Dryden and Chapman, Matthew Arnold, everyone translated Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Okay, it is the Greek literature. This is the Greek epic poetry. Okay, we cannot call it as English literature, English epic poetry. English epic poetry is Paradise Lost is English epic poetry. The translated work of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey by Dryden or Chapman, whoever it may be, it is actually Greek literature. It is not at all English literature. Okay, so the typical English epic poetry is Paradise Lost. It is not Dryden's translation of Homer's Iliad or Odyssey. Okay, so this is what Friedrich Schlegel says. And the next point, the role of a poet changed in this age. His role is great that he transcends individual to the universe. William Blake said that divine body is every man, and many philosophies were developed which resulted in numerous translations. The role of poet in the society has changed. His role is an improved one. Okay, and that's what Shelley and Wordsworth and everyone, all the romantic poets say that their poets are great, and they are the one who helps humanity. Because of poets only, humanity is able to function. That's what Shelley and Coleridge, William Wordsworth, Byron, everyone says. Not only in English literature and even romantic, and all Europeans during the romantic age say this point, that the poet is not an ordinary person. He is the one who takes the individual to who transcends the individual to the universe. Okay, because of poetry only, an individual is able to feel the spirituality. Okay, feel spirituality. Okay, and Blake says that the divine body is there in every man, and because of poetry only, an individual is able to feel his own divinity. That's what William Blake says. Likewise, there were many philosophies in all languages. Okay, so many philosophies and many scientific inventions and discoveries were made during this romantic age, and so the people understood the importance of translation. Many translators and many translations were done in all languages. Okay, see, Goethe, William Shakespeare, it is only during romantic age only William Shakespeare became famous all over the world, especially all over Europeans, all over Europe. See, when Shakespeare was living, all critics criticized him, attacked him. So he did not write a good drama. Likewise, Shakespeare was attacked and he was not famous. It was Samuel Johnson. So in literary criticism, you are going to study the second unit, Preface to Shakespeare. Okay. Because of that work, because of that book only, Shakespeare became famous all over England. If Dr. Johnson did not publish Preface to Shakespeare, then Shakespeare today we will not, we wouldn't have studied about Shakespeare. Okay, so because of Samuel Johnson only, today we are studying Shakespeare. Okay, so with that work Shakespeare became famous all over England, but during Romantic age Shakespeare's works were translated into all European languages, and thus Shakespeare became famous all over Europe and even world. Goethe also became famous all over Europe and all over world because of translations. Okay, and especially all writers were translated into all languages. All languages writers were translated into all European languages. So this is what happened during Romantic age. So, not only literature, philosophy, history, and everything was translated in all languages. In this age only, Shakespeare was translated in all European languages and became famous. Since there were many translators, critics found difficulty to distinguish proper translation, adaptation, and original poetry. Since this age is more of freedom, even translation also did not follow theories of translation. And so Romantic age, it's the age of liberty and did not follow rules and regulations. So critic found it difficulty to distinguish proper translation, adaptation, and free translation. See, all the terms are different. Proper translation, each word and each line, and even most importantly sense. Everything is considered and then it is translated. This is proper translation. Taking the main idea and adding and changing it completely is said to be adaptation, and the free translation is a kind of everything is considered but it is translated freely. Okay, so that is said to be free translation. There is not much change in free translation, but lots of changes is done in adaptation. Okay, so these are the differences between proper translation, free translation, and adaptation. Okay, so since there are no rules and regulations, so critics found the distinction between proper translation, free translation, and adaptation. So this is a headache for the critics. And so therefore critics want to distinguish the good translators and the bad translators. So how do they distinguish good translators and the bad translators? Good translators will translate from heart and soul. Mediocre translators or bad translators would translate mechanically. Okay, with the heart and soul and imagination and creativity, they translate that they are called as good translators, and mediocre translators they would simply make it without any heart and soul. This is the word, and I know many vocabularies in both the languages, therefore I am a translator. So this word is the translation of this word is this: cat is Pune, and okay, that's all. So likewise, if you translate, then he is a bad translator or a mediocre translator. Okay, so this topic is not over. We shall continue in the next video tomorrow. Okay, thank you.